Okay, I am in Detroit, Michigan. I'm in the United States. I teach seventh grade world studies. I've taught seventh and eighth grade middle school world studies for the last 3 years. I am teaching in an urban school in very downtown Detroit, and have been presenting on game-based learning for about a year and a half now.
Very good, very good. And can you tell us why you became a teacher and what sort of age are the pupils that you're engaging with?
So my kids are between 12 and 14 years old. We are in our students tend to be lower performing. So I do have the occasional student that's in 14, 15, 16 years old, even in middle school. I got into teaching specifically because I like working with students. The subject matter was great. World studies was in history, social studies, things of that nature are kind of where I found my niche in terms of the content that I wanted to teach. But I've provided that I know enough about the material to teach it. It doesn't really matter what I'm teaching as long as I'm working with kids.
Very good.
So,
Very
yep.
good. And according to your biography, you have a particular interest and experience in games-based learning. Can you give us some examples of how you've incorporated this into your teaching and what sort of feedback you're getting from your pupils?
Right. So I started last year working with my colleague, John Cassie, who incidentally works in Los Angeles, California, in the suburbs, Beverly Hills, very rich area. His students pay about $40,000 a year to go to this school. My students, probably, I would guess 90 to 95% of them between both parents don't make $40,000 in a year. And John kind of introduced me to this idea, and it works specifically with getting students motivated to actually do work. So my students were very lethargic in the class. They weren't very engaged. This gave them an avenue to kind of become engaged in the material. Some examples of some projects some games that I've done. I've created game boards where students have learned about the American colonies during their initial settlement as British colonies, as well as colonial life. Right now, I'm working on a game. My students are studying the Holocaust, and I'm working with an organization called Centropa, and these students are going to be recording video histories of themselves, and we're going to be sharing those video histories with urban students in Serbia, in Poland, in hopefully Israel. We're still working on getting that connection. But the idea being that you're gamifying their data collection. So you get so many points for an interview with a grandparent, so many more points for an interview with a great grandparent, things of that nature. And you put a total in a game atmosphere around it, and they become much into to the point where the structure of the game kind of fades away and they actually become engaged in the actual project.
Very good, lovely. And what sort of gamified classroom materials do you use with your pupils?
Right now, I would say it's pretty low resolution on my end, specifically because with things like I'm very fortunate in my school. I have a lot of computer access, so my students have used laptops, they've used computer labs, things of that nature, and I've used different. My game board will have the hyperlinks to it where they can click on it and go to these different things. The one restraint that I run into is I can't assume computer access in the home. So whereas my colleague John, teaching at very wealthy private schools, his game boards look very different than mine because he can create it all on one document and they can just select it and it's hyped to a PDF or to a website or what have you. I actually have to physically create all of these documents and get them to my students in order for them to participate because, like I said, I can't assume computer access in the home. I think with regards to, it's one of those things where it makes you appreciate technology more. I'm million ideas of what I could do if in that computer access. But I think whereas technology in the past has kind of been the big grab in education, what do I do when I can't get kids to buy in? Just incorporate some kind of technology and they'll usually buy in a lot better. I think gamification and game-based learning can be another one for teachers like myself that can assume that technology access.
Very good. Thank you very much. And do you use any devices such as the iPad in your classroom? And would you say there was an all-round favourite out of any devices that you use?
I have used iPads in the past. I have not used iPads this year. I would say, to be honest, favorite device is probably, they like the laptops because there's a comfort level with them. I think with the iPads, they like it because it's something new, but then when they realize they don't know how to do a lot with it, then they want to go back to the laptop because they know what they can do.
Yes.
So I think I would say the laptops are the big things. We do have MacBooks, so they're well-functioning computers. I think the students like anything where they can incorporate their own image, so like a photo booth, something like that, where they can just incorporate it, even if it's very small. I think they like that a lot. Anything where they can put their own signature on it, I think, is a big draw for them in terms of technology.
Brilliant. Good answer. And I was looking at your interesting website and seeing that you're involved in presenting at conferences. Can you tell us your goals of these presentations that you've been doing?
So the idea right now that my colleague John and I are working on is coming up with a framework. Right now it's a lot of introduction of the idea. So what does this look like? Why are we doing it? And how does it fit? So the way the presentation breaks down now is John does a piece on the theory behind it, sort of the game theory behind it. And then I kind of come in on the back end and say, okay, this is how I've implemented it in this context. So John's context is kind of an anomaly in that not a lot of the conferences that we presented at. The first conference was a lot of private schools. Educate for Sustainable Happiness was a lot of private schools. It's held at the Cushing Academy in Ashburnham, right outside of where all the Ivy League schools are. But the second conference was all public charter academies, so all public schools, and a lot of them were in the Detroit area. So when John's talking about, I use the technology and this, and my kids on their own laptop, and this, like, people are kind of like, yeah, that doesn't help me. So my is more, but you can do this in this environment, and here's how. This is the basic layout of what this looks like. What do we do from here? So right now it's more of an introductory. We've put out different contacts. I'm actually contacted by a museum system here in Detroit to work with them as a teaching fellow to design game-based learning for their museums. So hopefully looking to design some sort of an app that students can use when they come into the museums on an iPod Touch or on an iPhone, Android, whatever. So contacts like that, just seeing where we can grow the movement a little bit. Eventually, we'd like to get to a point where we can make it more of a workshop. So this is what we're doing. Here's the introduction. Now here's a half hour where you give us a piece of curriculum, we're going to show you how to gamify it. And then maybe that leads into professional development with full schools, books, whatever it leads into. But that's kind of the strategy that we're using to grow this thing out.
Very good, thank you. And can you tell us where you see education, or where you'd like to see education in, say, 10 years from now?
I did an interview with a very wealthy public school at about 30 miles from where I teach now, and it's a completely different world. Detroit is, like many other cities, urban and suburban are very, very different. And when I graduated, school that I interviewed at would have been everything that I had in terms of it. And when I sat down and I started talking to them about game-based learning and what I wanted to do, they came back at me with, well, we have what's called a common experience policy in our school, which means we have so many students that every student that takes 9th grade social studies will get the same experience regardless of the teacher. Not wrap my head around the idea that you honestly believe that you're going to create an assembly line where everybody's going to get the same experience, regardless of the teacher that they have, I don't understand the point of hiring different teachers. Why not just start cloning people? So I guess my hope for education in 10 years is that we've finally been able to break out of this common experience, common standards, cover as much as you can, not as well as you can or as deep as you can, and move into something where you're focusing on one issue, like the Holocaust, for say 8 to 10 weeks. And in that 8 to 10 weeks, you're able to talk about all different facets of it. Just going back to my answer, I'll use the word diversity.
Diversity. Lovely. Lovely.
Have to have understanding that every kid is different when they come to us. And I recently, at a conference that I presented at, I attended a session. The premise of the guy's presentation was that there's a different definition for the word fair and a different definition for the word equal. And fair means you're giving every kid what they need to be successful, and that's not always equal. So I would say diversity and an understanding of diversity in your student population.